we have heard about data centers, and I'll go in the order of first asking the question to Mohit, then to Mr. Gupta. Mohit, we talk about green data centers. Perhaps, firing the data centers over the next 10 years or something. What do you think? Would love to get your thoughts to just start off the conversation.
Good afternoon, and thanks, Avik. I hope I'm audible and not too much echo. Thanks to Business Standard for having me over. So yes, I actually thought you'll start with Sunil so that I get to understand what these guys are doing. And was the kind of demand for power people like us. So yes, we did discuss this a bit earlier. So when we say green, I'm only looking at how the data center is being powered. We understand the entire infrastructure on the data center side is with people like them. But what can be done today, all the data centers, I assume, are, the general acceptance is that they're highly power guzzlers, and most of them are looking at large-scale suppliers, baseload suppliers. But with the way India has been able to discover very, very really low real-time tariffs for the renewable sources, we see that the data centers can actually be powered by fully green or renewable energy sources on 24/7 basis. In fact, a lot of work which has been done by our team at Berkeley, this has brought it out very clearly that if we want to use, in fact, I was just talking to Sunil, so they have large plans. Of course, they already have close to about 200 megawatt of data centers in operation. So 200 megawatts of data center on round-the-clock basis can be easily powered. The important thing to note here is that in India, you can actually do a green power source much faster. You can actually do a green power source which is more competitive and inflation-proof. So 2 or 3 things which are very clearly in the favor of green. One, we can do these power plants supply sources in less than 2 years, which is what I think these guys are looking for. We can do it at cost, base load costs, which are actually cheaper than every other alternate sources in the country. Coal-based, nuclear, gas-based, and so on and so forth. So this makes eminent case. And what's also important, like I said, in the case of green data centers, the green power supply can be actually tied up for the next 15, 20 years, which is inflation-proof, because there's actually no element there or no resource there which is open to inflation. So I'll probably stop there and, yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much. Sunil, moving over to you. We have, of course, talked over the last 1 year about data centers, the expansion, as well as the sustainability challenges. Before we move into the sustainability question, just help me understand, help the audience understand. We all know that the modern data centers or the AI-powered data centers are far more powerful than the traditional ones. What actually makes them so powerful? What makes them actually so much more power consuming and water consuming compared to the traditional?
Sure, Avik, thanks. So just to start from the basics, anything we are using digital in our life, and I think every moment right now also, I think everybody must be using something or the other on their phone. At the back end, it's going to some data center. We say it's going to cloud, but that cloud is not the cloud in the sky. It's some physical buildings where you have got thousands and thousands of physical hardware servers on which software, the websites, and the applications are running in, which you are consuming on your mobile. So if digital is expanding in our lives by way of various mobile apps, by way of various applications you are using in your office, and it is continuously going to increase, but natural, the underlying infrastructure has to keep on increasing. So I need to keep on putting more and more hardware. I need to keep on putting more and more servers. And if that increases, I have to put more and more data centers to host that. So that is the basic. So even before we were doing AI, because of the adoption of the regular digital application in our lives, that was growing organically almost like 25–30%. We have seen what UPI has done in our lives, right? And you have got tens and tens of applications. Your TV also has become now a complete smart TV now. It is no more a cable-driven TV, which is also digital. So everything is coming on our devices in a digital way, and that is putting a strain on the data center. Now, when you are putting these applications in a data center, that hardware in a data center, before the advent of AI, a typical, like in a data center, will have rows and rows of racks in which the equipment are there. And a typical rack, when you stuff it with lots of hardware, would have consumed 6-7 kilowatt per rack. That was the typical power density we have seen for last 25 years, in our data centers. And that was good enough. It was increasing a little bit, but more or less that was the case. The moment AI came into our lives, whether you are training the models like a ChatGPT or a Gemini or a Grok, or whether you are putting your prompt into these models, when we are putting a prompt in ChatGPT and then getting a response, at the back end, the hardware which is working is not a regular hardware, which we have used in our 25 years for our regular applications. This hardware is powered by special type of chips called GPUs, and almost like 95% of these GPUs worldwide are made by one company, which is NVIDIA. Now, these chips, by the nature of how these chips work, they consume minimum 10 times more power than what the regular CPU chips were consuming, right? So if you just extrapolate now, in the same physical rack in a data center, if earlier I was consuming 6 kilowatt per rack, suddenly I'm supposed to consume 60 kilowatt per rack. And if we go by the latest chips, which NVIDIA has released, which I'm myself implementing in my own Noida data center, they will be consuming around 150 kilowatt per rack. So imagine the density, one rack with 6 kVA power, which itself is equivalent to 405 of our flats. 6 kVA also is equal to 405 of our residential flats. If you make that 6 kilowatt to a 150 kilowatt per rack, number one, the density increases like anything. So the power required to cool this equipment also increases significantly. And the total amount of power which you require in the same footprint of the building. So a data center building, which I was happy making of a 20 megawatt size, maybe till 2 years back, suddenly I am being made to make a 100 megawatt single building and being made to make a campus of 1 gigawatt. So when you hear Google announcing a large campus in Vizag or others also talking about these large campuses, they are primarily driven by, because AI is going to use these specialized type of chips, and these chips are extremely power hungry, they're extremely cooling hungry.
Thank you so much. And I'll take a moment to actually welcome Mr. Dhingra on the stage. Thank you so much, sir, for making it. But I'll stick to one more question before I move over to Mr. Dhingra. What are some of the steps that data center companies like Yotta and the others that are there in India, that could be the foreign ones as well as the India ones, what are they actually doing to sort of minimize or reduce the consumption of power as well as water?
Yeah.
Because most of these centers probably will come up in Mumbai or Chennai.
Yeah.
And in India, we of course know that power is probably stressed and water is almost very, very scarce.
Yeah. So there are two questions which we as the industry are talking all the time. One is the amount of power we are consuming, as Avik just asked. And second is the type of power we are consuming. Like instead of thermal power, we use green power. So right now I'll focus on the first question, that what is the amount of power we are consuming and can we reduce that? See, in this case, there is something in the hands of the hardware manufacturer, the chips manufacturer. There's something in the hands of the software builders, the people who are building models. And then there's something in the hands of the data center operator. So all the three people have some contributions to do to reduce the power in the data center. The hardware manufacturer, how efficient is the chip that it can process much more cycles of compute with lesser amount of power? That is what people like NVIDIA are doing. Every new chip they are releasing, they are making it far more power efficient compared to what the previous generation was. That is step one. Similarly, the people who are making AI models or doing the software coding, how efficient is that code, that the computation of that code takes much lesser hardware cycle than more. That is the second part of that. But the third part, which is quite a big part, comes on data centers. What do we do? I cannot control the power which goes into hardware, because that is what chip guys and the software guys can control. What I can control as a DC operator is the amount of power I require for cooling these chips, right? So that is where traditionally, like, data centers were using a method called air cooling, right? That you are exchanging the heat with air and you are just throwing cool air on the equipment and you cool it. It was quite good till the time we were having, as I said, 4, 5, 6 kilowatt per rack. That air as a medium of cooling was quite good. Then we started using, okay, let's use chillers. So there is some chillers which is exchanging heat with air, but then there is a closed loop water, and that water remains on the periphery of the server hall, and that water cools the air, and that air again is thrown in the rack. Again, we were happy to do 8 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt per rack with this method. Now with GPUs coming in, all these methods are just failing. The only method now available to us is you actually take water right inside the rack, inside the equipment, terminate on the chip itself. Because water being like the best conductor of heat would always extract that heat immediately. So you're not leaving any room for air in between. The water will just extract the heat from the GPU chip or the memory chip and just take it out, and then basically, then finally the hot water goes back and then heat exchange happens with air. So this something which we in our jargon call direct to chip cooling or liquid cooling is the one method which we as an industry, it has become a norm. There's no alternate actually, which we are adopting. And so there's one jargon we use again in our industry called PUE, power usage efficiency. That is for every 1 unit of power which goes into an equipment, how much extra units you're consuming for cooling it. So industry was so far working on a PUE of around 1.4, 1.5. For every 1 unit of power goes to equipment, we'll take another 0.4, 0.5 for cooling it. With this direct to chip liquid cooling, we are able to bring that down to around 1.2 or 1.1, which means you are able to save that much of power. So this is the method, and of course there are many other operational best practices. How do you make sure that cold air does not leak the way we do in our homes, that if there's an air conditioner working, you just close your door. Fundamentally the same method, that there are many good operating practices using which you are able to control the amount of power which goes into the cooling of the equipment.
Got it. Thank you so much. I'll come back to you over the water usage, but I'll move over to Mr. Dhingra. The country's focus on renewable energy, of course, is well known. Almost perhaps 50% of the total generating capacity is almost now on the non-fossil part. Given this situation, what sort of critical role, renewable energy companies like you can actually play to cater to the huge power demand that is, of course, almost obvious to come over the next 5 years? Because I'll just give you the data, because right now I think the load capacity for the data centers is around 1.3, 1.5 gigawatts. It is expected to almost go to about 8 gigawatts by 2030, what Jeffrey says according to the report. So how do you think renewable energy can actually stand up and meet the demand?
As you would have seen, renewable energy, as you rightly mentioned, already contributes 50% of the overall installed capacity. And this year we are on track to deliver more than 40 gigawatts of solar and more than 5 gigawatts of wind. So it's the highest ever addition in the grid we are seeing on the renewables. And of course, we are all searching for more demand centers to accommodate this growth in renewables. Because as we are growing in renewables, this is an intermittent power. So we all need round-the-clock sort of power, which there are more and more sinks for that power, which will help all of us supply more power, because this sector has all the ingredients, and of course, we are all very cost competitive. So as we would have seen that India has led the way in terms of the cost competitiveness of renewables. The delivered cost of solar in India is one of the cheapest in the world. And we are moving towards that on the battery side, on the PSP side, and all the new technologies. So we are very, very competitive on the power. So first and foremost, every industry needs the cheap solution. Renewable stands head to head or even ahead of other sources of power in terms of supplying cheaper power, cheaper than the state electricity board is able to supply. So as you would have seen, most of the data center operators are already tied up with renewable power operators. They have set up their own capacities. So renewable is more than geared up to supply this additional demand of 8 gigawatts round the clock demand, if I may say. Because right now, various customers like railways are already buying round the clock power, which a data center may also look at. And that can be done very efficiently through a mix of solar heavy, battery, and plus small mix of wind at a very competitive tariffs, which are much lower than thermal, and which are even after the, you can say, the transmission waiver. So renewable, of course, is cleaner, and of course it can be done faster. The only thing which is required is to have a data center specific policy which allows the current market operators to aggregate this demand and plan. Because right now our planning is centered around discoms and states, how they want to procure, and each state has their own roadmap regarding growth. So the data centers now need to post this budget policy change and now the renewed push. The states need to factor these very aggressively into their plans. And that roadmap needs to be blessed by the Central Planning Commission and the CA and the 5-year plan, whatever is made. Because once that is done, then the global players, the global tech companies will be able to better plan which are the places where they can get the cheap power, and of course where they can get the most competitive regulatory policies. Because we need to, as a renewable player, we need to plan whether we will build on the central grid, we will build on the state grid, and also there is a critical mass you need to build to be very competitive on the transmission infrastructure. Let's say a 400 kV connection is more cost efficient as compared to a smaller connection, and you need a critical mass to build that. So aggregating customers is not possible for all renewable players to, let's say, companies like Yotta, and they are into this space. And of course, a renewable company will take some time to get into that direct to the customers, the tech companies, right? So we need players like Yotta, and of course, there are as an aggregation, and the governments to aggregate, and of course. And they can play a larger role, because in terms like cooling and other things, we are of course on early stage, like we are developing green ammonia, we are developing, so there could be a synergy in terms of cooling basis the green ammonia, because that also produces a lot of heat, and which can be channeled. So we are, there could be synergies in terms of setting up renewable capacities and also using new technologies in terms of the data center.
Thank you. You talked about, of course, the national data center policy, and Mohit, I'll come to you there. Of course, it's still in the works, but what are some of the pillars, or some of the areas of focus that policy should have when it comes to, the green energy focus, the sustainability bit? What's your opinion there? What's your take?
So I think we need to look at it in maybe a couple of buckets. And first and foremost, a data center, as I assume, and Sunil can probably confirm, the cost of electricity is not the deciding factor. Like in many other cases, for example, Nikhil mentioned ammonia, there the cost of electricity becomes a key component as to how you will bring your prices down. For data centers, the amount of money these guys are coughing up for NVIDIA's chips are humongous compared to the cost of electricity in the whole ecosystem. So if you look at the national data center policy, and probably I will slightly differ from Nikhil here, you see, if we look at what these guys are proposing, for example, the Google data center in Andhra is about 1 gigawatt data center. I think in the AI Summit, Reliance also announced another 1.5 gigawatt. You yourself said you could be looking at 1 to 2 gigawatt, and then there are a host of other hyperscalers looking at data centers. So in terms of demand per se, I don't think an aggregator is any longer required, because if one gentleman is willing to buy 1 gigawatt of round-the-clock power, you can have enough number of people lining up at the doorstep to say, I can supply cheap. And just for reference, for example, and Nikhil did mention this, there was recently a bid conducted by SECI, which was solar plus 6-hour battery storage. I think that was about 1,200 megawatt and 2,400 megawatt hour of storage. That is exactly the configuration which can actually deliver 400 megawatts of round-the-clock green power. So you don't actually need to do anything else. You just have to ensure that the battery discharge happens as per your requirement during non-solar hours. The price which was discovered there was 3 rupees 12 paise. Is that, Nikhil, if you remember? Something like that. That was
a peak power bid.
That was a peak power bid. I'm saying so 400 odd megawatt of green power at 3 rupees 12 paise. Okay, let's assume it's not 3 rupees 12. You could be, no, I'm saying if you do some other kinds of tenders, location specific, it would actually be around 4 rupees. I don't see which other source of electricity in the country can do that. What is required is to kind of have a focus on that. For example, I mean, if I would say government probably doesn't need to do anything, which is what I was trying to say. I mean, a national data center policy should focus on what are the kind of incentives these guys need. they might be asking for the moon. So let government decide whether these guys want the moon or government can give the moon, what kind of tax exemption and so on and so forth. I will probably not like to interfere there, it's their business. But as a power producer, we want to ensure that whatever we are setting up, we get a decent return on that. And if data center people are willing to tie up long-term basis, 20, 25 years, even better. What is probably required is more clarity on a couple of other things. For example, a data center can be set up anywhere. And India is one of those places where, I'm no expert here, but probably what you need is an easy connectivity to the transmission system. You should have a connectivity wherein the state regulator allows you to connect to open access. So you don't have to go around circles that I want to draw power as a large consumer. And there are some regulations. So in some states, they've already allowed, for example, that you could set up data centers, you could connect to the central grid, you could connect to the state grid directly. And then, of course, there are already policies which say that if you pick up some stake in the power company, a lot of those charges are in any case waived off. So we're just doing a broad number, and our team at Berkeley did. So what we are seeing is that even if you consider a 4 rupee kind of tariff, which will be flat in nominal terms for 25 years, and add, as a worst case scenario, another 60, 71 rupee. So at 5 rupees, you could have electricity at your data center over all the systems. I think it's a win-win game for them. Even if you agree for 550, I'm sure you don't mind, as long as that is confirmed. They get the bragging rights for green, which I don't know whether they need. They're not bothered about. But if you look at the entire way how the data centers are being developed, you mentioned the Jeffries report. I think USA is by far the leader in that, and I know people are talking about 100-odd gigawatts of data centers. But the biggest challenge in US today is the fact that they do not have electricity supply. So you might have read also in the newspapers that I think one of these guys went and bought the 3 Mile Island nuclear power supply, 800 megawatt, Microsoft was on. Another guy went around and they're trying to find gas turbines in the system where they can connect those systems. Because whatever we may say, the current dispensation in US is not inclined for renewable. And in any case, in USA, if you need transmission permitting, it's like a 10-year line. So the queue in USA for transmission is a 10-year long queue. Fortunately for us in India, we could do all that, like I said, in 2 hours flat. So India has that unique advantage. And we have a lot of land which could be used. The choice is between a data center operator and the electricity IPP, if I may say so, whether they can do it together. Ideal situation, as Nikhil also mentioned, is if we have a power source which has the renewable generation source like the solar and the battery co-located, you use a single transmission line and supply to wherever you want. Many states like Andhra and Maharashtra, I think they have been aggressively pursuing the data center route to increase the supply, and that also helps not only attract investment, which is huge by any case, but it also ensures that a lot of power. Today, for example, and this is a slight deviation from the point we're discussing, for example, there is already surplus electrons in the system today because the demand growth in all other sectors during the daytime, because we set up a lot of solar, is not matching with what the demand is, what the supply is. So these are things, once storage comes into the picture, whether it's solar plus storage or solar plus wind plus storage, either way, I mean, whatever configuration you do, you can get round the clock, reasonably priced, attractively priced, inflation-proof power for the next 25 years.
We think we're a little better on power compared to water, but I'll take the question on power again to you, Mr. Gupta. We have again discussed this earlier, that the total demand in India may still be less than 1% of the total capacity that the data centers now need. Compared to, let's say, in the US, which may be about 4, Singapore may be about 8, one of the reasons why I think they stopped construction of these centers, and even perhaps 20% in Ireland. That led to a lot of clamor. Now, with the expansion, concurrent expansion of the grids as well as the data centers, do you think India is going to reach that, let's say that curve or the dangerous point where you think, or you probably need to think twice about the expansion of these centers?
Very relevant question, Avik. Frankly speaking, in all such events for the last couple of years, whenever I'm speaking and this question comes, I always say that as of now, we are nowhere close to the situation where a Singapore reached or a US reached. In Singapore, there was a situation in 2017 where almost 9% or 10% of the power of the city country was actually getting consumed in few hundred buildings which were data centers. So they had to put a moratorium on any further construction of data center, and that moratorium got lifted in 2022, but with lots of limitation on the size of data center and with the entire power to those buildings need to be green and all the stuff. But India, as of now, if I just give you some numbers, India was a total of 200 megawatt of data center capacity till 2016. It used to be like a peanut capacity compared to the world stage. Because of multiple developments and digital adoption and cloud operators coming and setting up their infrastructure in India, that 200 megawatt has become around 1.4 gigawatt as we sit today. So in the last 7-8 years, the capacity has become 7 times. If AI would not have come on the horizon, we all were thinking that 2030 will become about 3 gigawatt. That was based on all our announced plans that we all are building data centers, and based on that, we are sure that the country will become 3 gigawatt. That itself would have put India to among the number 2nd or number 3rd in Asia, behind possibly China and Japan. But with AI coming in, if you see any reports, the numbers have started varying between 6 gigawatt to double-digit numbers, 12 gigawatt, 15 gigawatt. I think today morning a report has come, I think, from Deloitte, which is talking about that by 2030, this 1.4 gigawatt will become, I think, 8 gigawatts. So suddenly you are talking about much larger numbers. Even if I talk in terms of the actual usage, right? So from a today's situation, I think we are using around 10 terawatt hours in data centers out of some 1500 terawatt hours, which the country as a whole consumes, which is like 0.6%. But if we see the projection of 2030, the 10 terawatt hours will become 50 terawatt hours, while the country will consume around 24 terawatt hours. So if you see the proportion, suddenly you become around 2.5–3% of the total power being consumed in the whole of the country. So basically, when you start talking that India also has started reaching a stage where 3% of the power actual consumed in India will just get consumed in some few hundreds of buildings, then you start getting into that tipping point that now we need to look back and see what all things we do, as you said, both in terms of reducing the consumption of power by way of cooling optimization, things like that, and also trying to make the maximum power towards green instead of just using thermal power. So I think the power experts are here and they have given enough data already. But and then the way we look at it, I don't see in terms of generation capacity, India has a challenge, both in terms of installed capacity as well as in terms of the actual capacity which we all can use, because it's a mix of thermal, green and everything, which is not 24/7. I don't think India has a problem in terms of the total generated capacity. Our issue comes only when the last mile comes in, because data centers will not be in the center of city where maybe the grid may be strong. I will be building data center at a periphery of a main city, let's say Greater Noida here in NCR, or like Noida, Greater Noida has emerged as a center in NCR. In Mumbai, it's not center Mumbai, it is Navi Mumbai, and now we are going towards Panvel and beyond that area, the Mumbai 3.0, because that is where the lines are available, 440, 765 lines are available, and you can draw some big powers and all the stuff. So when you are getting into those remote areas, whether the last mile distribution is available or not, so the way we mitigate is when I start building my data center building, right at that moment we start putting our own express feeder also. It may take 2 years, but by the time my building is ready, my own on-site substation along with those power lines are ready, and then you don't prepare for one building. Like today in Mumbai, I may be consuming around 150–200 megawatt in my campus, but it's like a 100 megawatt campus, 100 acres campus, but the feasibility which I've received is for 2 gigawatts. So if tomorrow, based on the demand which I have, based on my own AI workload which I run GPUs, but also other hyperscalers want to come and host with me. And if I just see the immediate demand, they all want to scale, my capacity and other capacity put together will scale to 2 gigawatt, possibly 5 years down the line itself. So if you're talking about in a concentrated 100 acres, 2 gigawatt to be consumed, then the impact on the lines, the last mile distribution lines become very, very important.
And just a quick question you want to add, please go ahead.
Yes, so that exactly is the thing which India is geared for. And I really thank you for raising this point, and I'm sure Nikhil can back me up on this. All the states, for example, today are quite focused because this is one very important pillar for growth. Not only growth of AI per se, but also growth of the power sector. I mean, everything said and done, large demand sections are actually required. So I don't see why it's a 2 gigawatt thing or a 1 gigawatt thing. As a buyer, you have the option of either buying directly from the grid, so you could lay a captive line, or you could go through the DISCOM. And both these options are available today. So there already are framework mechanisms available which can make this happen quickly.
Thank you. Just one quick question to Mr. Dhingra before we open it up for the audience for questions. You've also expressed your desire to move into expand into nuclear. The government has also, of course, stressed on the same, open it up for the private sector, and Mr. Vaishnav has also said that nuclear can be also another great alternative for the data centers. What are your expansion plans there?
So today there are early days for nuclear, but of course it's a very promising sector. As we have seen with the government, they have successfully privatized a lot of sectors and encouraged the private participation where it did not exist. So we are very positive about private sector participation in renewables and the regulatory and liability framework getting loosened, because it's a great choice, as we have seen in more developed markets like US and other countries. Nuclear has to be there in a large way. And of course, the government is doing the right thing of capping the liability, allowing the private sector to be present in as much value chain as possible. So it will be a great source, I believe, very clean source of firm power. And I think early days for us for planning about renewables, but as and when the sector opens, I think we will definitely look at it. And it is, as far as data center is concerned, it's a very good source for data center per se. It's a very welcome addition to renewables and various other choices they have. And it can be closer to their operations also. So that is one other thing, like he's talking about Navi Mumbai, another, it need not be at a faraway place. So that's another advantage of nuclear.
Just to add to that, I mean, our industry, because the unique thing, our industry is 24/7. The workload does not change. Whatever you're consuming in the daytime or the evening time or the night time, everything remains the same. It's not people who will come and go out of office. It's equipment all the time. So while the industry as a whole has adopted green like anything, I think any and every player is consuming around 25-30% of green in their total power mix today. But yes, either a combination of, as Mohit said, that a solar and wind with coupled with battery or a banking facility, or you get something like a long-term hydro arrangement, which is 24/7, or ideally the nuclear, because then I can bypass the grid altogether. I don't need to go to far-off location to put my solar panels. I can have SMR right next to my data center and bypass the grid and directly feed into my building. So that is the ultimate final solution for us. Right?
We'll see how that possibility sort of pans out. We have about 5 minutes. We'll open it up for the question for the audience. Quite a few hands. Of course, we'll start from the left, the gentleman there.
My name is Prakash Nedungadi, and I run a consultancy, Red Band Strategy and Design. Question to you, Sunil, was about water. Because there are a lot of reports in the press about the amount of water these data centers will consume. And we just wanted to get more clarity about that. Is that just hava, or is it really pani?
Yeah. You said right. While we are talking about pani, lekin hava thodi jata hai is discussion mein. So you are right. So see, I tell you, a lot of these concerns are coming based on what has been implemented in the West. Because the traditional data centers, they all were getting cooled with water-cooled chillers. And for that, you need cooling towers and you need a fresh supply of water. And that water also was not treated water or STP water, that actually was the fresh water coming in. So naturally, you are trying to take the water away from citizens and trying to feed into the buildings, and people will protest, for sure. In India, because I would say sometime when you start scaling late, it's good and bad both. Bad maybe because you started late, you're catching up as a country. But good, we adopted the latest technologies right from day one. As I said, 2016-17 is the time when India started scaling up. So none of us, maybe for our own business reasons, we were never sure whether we will be able to have, let's say, next 50 years of supply of so much of water continuously to our buildings. So if you're not sure, you would rather like to skip that option and you would rather go for an air-cooled chiller option where the water is only in a closed loop. The actual heat is getting exchanged with air, water is there in a closed loop and you are topping it up once in 6 months only. And that water also we are putting in our pipes is also a STP water, treated water, not fresh water. So India as a country and our whole industry has skipped that problem completely. So while we keep on talking about our power usage effectiveness, how to do a better cooling, how to optimize power, how to have more green power, I think our industry does not even talk about the WUE concept, the water usage effectiveness, because in India that concern is not there at all.
Any other questions? Okay, the gentleman again on the left.
This side.
Who else raised their hands? Okay.
Thanks. Namaskar. Hearty congratulations to Team Business Standard for having curated such a wonderful and apt session. My name is Amit Sharma and I represent Transcon group of companies, and one of the verticals is manufacturing and designing indigenously servers which are used for data centers. And I would like to get connected with Mr. Sunil in this regards, because we are now into third generation of servers which are not immersion cooling. We are talking about oil-cooled systems. So in that connection, I would like to have some conversations later with you.
Sure, so we'll take it up after. Any other questions? Okay, lady, please go ahead. She wants it. Okay, just a moment. We'll take her question and then we'll go over there. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Arushi Shukla. I'm from Uniki by JJ Tax. My question is directed towards Mr. Sunil. Today, a significant share of your power already comes from green sources. I mean, the data center in Greater Noida is already 100% from green sources. My question is slightly directed towards the tax part of it. What financial or tax incentives actually move the needle for data center operator? Accelerated depreciation, green bonds, viability gap funding for renewables, or something else?
Good question. I think Mohit was giving a hint of that itself. When we are saying that all the operators are going to both central government, Ministry of IT, Ministry of Power, as well as with state governments. Most of these things, by the way, are state government subjects. So central government keeps on saying, the Secretary IT keeps so many times says, why data centers are under my ministry? It should rather be Ministry of Power, because all the time you keep on talking power. And second is point always is that almost all your subjects, land, construction, government approvals, power, everything is state subject. It's not a central subject. So, but having said that, whether it is the central government data center policy which is about to come or the various state government data center policies, beyond a point, I don't think we as the industry are looking for fiscal incentives, right? What we all are asking for and what they are trying to do is a cliché word, ease of doing business. Because we end up asking for 40, 50 approvals before the tender goes live,
Exactly.
right? So that is what we want to avoid, right? And of course, we always say that to the government that generate more demand. So the budget provision of that 20-year tax holidays to foreign cloud operators, it has been misunderstood quite a lot in the media that essentially the demand which was not there in India, they are trying to bring that in India. So Indian customers' demand obviously is getting hosted in India. But what if I also start bringing the applications which are of, let's say, Hong Kong or Singapore or Malaysia or US or Europe and host them in India? So government is saying, bring that also in India. Let India become the hosting cloud AI hub, not only for India, but also for the rest of the world. So we are expecting the government of India to increase demand for us, right? And of course, give us ease of doing business. Why I'm not asking for, beyond a point, great incentives? Because as I think Mohit said, we are in a unique position in India, unlike US or Europe, where not only by adopting green, I score, as he said, good points that I am green. that helps me in getting contracts, by the way, from foreign companies because they are concerned about that. It also reduces my cost, right? Against a 7 rupees, 7.5 rupees average, city to city it differs. In Bombay, I end up paying 10 rupees. If I get, including wheeling charges, transmission charges, losses, everything put together, if I get it even at 6 rupees, I end up saving 15-20% in terms of the cost. And that cost is significant. So as such, you don't need incentive. Any incentive comes which increases the overall demand, which makes India competitive because you are competing with other centers in APAC also, which is great. But I would say the industry is profitable. We don't need fiscal incentives. We rather are only asking for, that we can do the business more easily. That's the only thing. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll move over to the lady first. She's supposed to ask the tough question.
Okay, so my question is to three of you, because three of you represent different industries which are responsible for a lot of energy, right? We're talking about energy transition. A lot of you, since morning I've heard speaking about hydrogen, green hydrogen, aluminum, this, that. You just mentioned, Mr. Gupta, nuclear. Now, while we talk about energy transition, the Earth's temperature is rising on the other side. We know that we have crossed 1.5 degrees, and South Asia is under extreme threat. While we talk about this here, there is permafrost happening at Himalayas, because of which the glaciers are melting, and there are so many other issues. We're not going to get into that. Question is, as leaders of this particular energy transition industries, and you come from one of the research and development, public policy, how are you engaging with government, number one? That now that I'm talking about data centers and nuclear, so how much of carbon emissions am I going to contribute more, and what should I do at the same time to become sustainable? Because that's when you really are addressing sustainability change. So what are you doing with regards with that, with the government? And second, to engage and educate the public. Yeah, these two.
I'll give you just 30 seconds each to just take the question. We'll have to wrap it up. Mr. Chauhan is already there.
So I think part of the discussion, and I think most of it was about green data centers. So I think, I'm not saying it answers the question fully or not, but the whole idea here is that India is the place where green data centers make eminent sense. So we are not looking at adding to the CO2 bank in the atmosphere. We are actually looking to power these data centers by green energy, no carbon emissions. So, and like I said earlier, other than USA, I mean, forget USA, USA also is not doing green data centers. Probably other than China, we don't have much information about that. India is the place which can actually host, and I endorse your views completely, we can actually host 50 gigawatt, 100 gigawatt data centers fully powered by green. No, happening is what the government has to do. These guys are looking for demand. Government says, yeah, so that can happen. Yeah.
Mr. Dhingra, just a quick wrap up. Yes.
All of us are, as you see, we have crossed 50% of the total energy is renewables. And India is a leader in that. So he's totally right that we can fully cater to 50 gigawatts of demand. So we don't think that renewable energy will be lagging in terms of supplying to data center. The data center can only lag in terms of creating demand.
And I can just put a concluding word. As I said, the industry, because it started building and scaling late in 17, 18 onwards, on average, I can safely say on behalf of every operator in the industry, we are 30 to 40% green in our power consumption. My own data center in Mumbai is 80% green. My campus in Greater Noida is 100% green, right? And we try to do that by way of short-term, long-term, medium-term contracts. If I get hydro, I take hydro. If I get solar, wind, whatever. In future, if nuclear comes, we'll be the first one to take as an industry. And one thing I wanted to say that whether it is central government policy, data center policy, which is going to come up, or state government policies, they are linking many of the incentives to us based on what is my power usage efficiency and what is my green quotient. So this is government's way of doing it. While we don't need financial incentives, but government is saying, if I will give you financial incentives or any incentive for any matter, we will link it to how efficient you are and how green you are. I think that is great. Yeah.
So very quickly, just one point, you had asked me what government needs to do, and we have Mani Mantriji also here. So only thing, the national data center policy, I can say that we need to add the word green there. I totally agree with you, because India is a place which can actually house green data centers to the highest possible limit. So if we start calling association, I don't know government agrees or not, National Green Data Center Policy could be a really very important step and a messaging that this is the place.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. That brings us to the end of this session. Hope you guys, all of you enjoyed it. And it was a pleasure to host all of you gentlemen. Thank you so much.